No, no,
No.
no, not yet. We're getting there. There we go. Okay.
I have one. This is good. I'll do the stuff. Yeah. I guess I do.
It'll come up in a minute. No, it's just, it'll be a minute. Well, we had it set up. Now we're just finding out something for case. I think it's better to go. Keep it loud. Or we can try. Try it? Start. Hi.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, can you speak up? Because Councilor Marchant was having trouble hearing you.
Councilor Moore. I'd like to welcome everybody to the council meeting Tuesday, June 16th. The meeting is here at the community center. If you're looking, you're on the amended agenda. And first of all, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move on. We're fortunate to have the AECOM landfill presentation, and we have Lisa and I believe Marie here with us tonight. So I will turn it over to them. And thank you, ladies, for being here and answering questions for us.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. I will just start by sharing my screen. Unfortunately, I need Chris as the host for you to allow me to share my screen, I believe.
think you should be able to. I had it turned on.
Okay, just give me one moment here. Does everyone see my screen?
Having trouble with it. YouTube.
You see it on the little screen, not on the big screen.
Sorry. Oh, it's coming up on you.
Okay.
How smart you are. Oh, it's on, Will. Computer trouble. All right, we're gonna check out.
Who's your jump ball?
John Paul's evaluation.
So are we all good now?
You're good.
Awesome. That's good to hear. So I just wanted to first thank the township for allowing us to provide this update on the fill and sequencing plan for the Wolf Lake and Bear Creek landfill sites. And similar to our last presentation, just have a brief agenda. We'll go through a safety moment. There were some questions about different types of surveys and how they apply to the site. So I'll just briefly review that and what surveys have been conducted at the site, and then get into the details for both Bear Creek and Wolf Lake landfill on the results of the staking and the cross-section cell development and sequencing and final proposed contours. And then open it up for questions. So from a safety moment perspective, ultimately, we're in a period where I know I am suffering a little bit from lockdown burnout, being in the GTA. And so it's just important that while we are in a period where restrictions are being released or removed, that we're aware that that we need to now boost our resilience to build in our ability to bounce back quickly from adversity, whether it be physically, mentally, or emotionally, and to be able to adapt to the changes that are currently constant around us, and to learn and grow while doing so. If you're lucky enough to be someone who has more downtime given COVID-19, then obviously we recommend that you use that downtime to build your resilience. And if you don't have enough downtime right now, similar to myself, it's important just to make sure that you're aware that in order to build your resilience back up, you just have to put it in your schedule to weave those more restorative, relaxing activities into day-to-day lives, so that we can prioritize that for ourselves and our families. And one quick acronym to consider while focusing on rebuilding or building that resilience is REST, when it deals with retreat, and that's being able to take moments away where you disengage from the world around you, particularly as things have changed, where we have more screen time, a more interaction on devices, to be able to just close your eyes and take that moment of relaxation. And then the E stands for eating and healthfully, ideally, and just being aware that if you have a high carbohydrate diet, that builds up more acids in your body, and therefore it creates your body more challenges to be able to process that food. And sleep is the most powerful performance enhancer we have. And if we don't get sufficient sleep, then our cortisol levels become too high and our melatonin cannot kick in. And therefore our serotonin supplies are not renewed while we sleep. So what does that mean? It means that we end up being a little bit short-tempered and having a brain fog and not able to think clearly than the following day. And the last is treat, and there are two types of treats, those that are nice to start with, but maybe either mildly addictive or not necessarily long-term rejuvenators for ourselves, such as sugars or alcohol. And then there's those that are truly restorative, and they may not be all surrounded by food. It may be something as simple as taking a few minutes to enjoy reading an article in a magazine or online, watching a TED Talk or a documentary, or even playing. I know for myself, if we do a family game night now to reduce our screen time with my kids and my husband, so that just gives us a different outlook or a different output while trying to build that resilience. So that's the safety moment. And then, just going to talk a little bit about the types of surveys that are typically conducted at landfill sites or sites that require an environmental approval. And the first one is a legal survey. And that survey typically is dealing with property line definition, whether it be for lots and concessions, and ensuring that the outline of the property is well defined and that there are survey stakes or benchmarks, SIBs, in place. Typically, these surveys are done when in a landfill scenario, when an application is being made to site a landfill, and the ministry will require a legal survey, so it's understood what is within property and what is not. Another example is when you're looking to sever a property, a legal survey would be required. On the landfill side, more typically a full site topographic survey is required, and that's done at the beginning of the site life to establish a benchmark and to know what the ground surface is for future operations and to have something to compare to. Unfortunately, for a number of landfills that came into being in the 1970s and 1980s, there isn't necessarily this full site topographic survey before any waste was placed on the sites. So as a result, during the life of a landfill, there may be the need for that full site topographic survey. The third one that I wanted to mention was a footprint, as well as the buffer, so the active operational side of the landfill, as a topographic survey, again, to make sure that we have an understanding of each of the contour lines of the existing conditions surface of the site. And that helps landfill operators assess where they are overall when they have a change in direction on where they're going to be filling on their landfill, or whether they want to look at changing the cell sequencing for a landfill. And the one that we have typically done for Wolf and Bear is an active area landfill survey. And ultimately, wherever the active cell or area on the landfill is in a given year, there is an annual survey conducted routinely so that we can determine the changes between the years. This is not a survey that necessarily is very limited in the edges of the survey, so that it will go 20 meters beyond the actual active area, because the active area will move subtly between years, so that we have the ability to look at the layer difference between a 2019 survey, for example, and a 2018 survey. So that's just a little bit about the type of surveys we typically encounter for landfill sites. And now I'm going to switch to looking at the review of Bear Creek. So this is the figure of the Bear Creek landfill, and ultimately the results of the staking are that there were 4 stakes put in each of the corners of the footprint area, the area that is allowed to receive waste in the landfill, as well as in the midpoint along that those boundaries. In this case, also for Bear, 2 other survey stake points were chosen inside the more recent activity areas as per this one, and also this one to get a better understanding of what was happening in this currently forested or tree vegetated area. The results of this survey or this staking of these particular points indicate that to the northeast, so in this area, where you can see the contours beyond and the green outline of the active fill area, there is fill that has gone beyond the footprint. And so that was raised and is currently being removed and brought back into the overall footprint. This was identified back in 2019, the possibility that this active waste area was going beyond the footprint, which is why the staking was proposed in the first place. What was not known at that time was the fact that along the eastern edge, these contours indicate there's actually fill beyond the allowable limits to the east in the buffer zone. And I'll talk a little bit further once we look at the cross sections in a moment about what needs to happen for that fill beyond allowable limits, or F-ball as it's also referred to, versus the overfill that's already being pulled back into the waste footprint. So from a cross-sectional perspective, we have cross-section 8.
Second?
Yep.
Can you help us follow along with you on the maps that we've been given? Because this is not looking the same to me, and
B1.
I'm confused.
This is Bear Creek, and so in the memo, we likely did Wolf Lake first.
Yes, but we have several different maps, and I was just trying to find the right one because I'm not really following along.
So this is figure B1.
Thank you.
And there is a considerable lag for
Yep.
the YouTube up on the.
That's why I
screen there.
can't, I have to follow with this because I can't follow on the screen.
It's-
No, that's fine because we have these, so that's perfect.
That's why you did that. Yeah.
Sorry, Maureen, to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. So for the cross section AA, sorry, I'm just going to go back to the figure that it goes from the eastern to the western, cuts across from east to west across the landfill, and BB goes from south to north. So looking at that, you will see for AA prime, and this is the eastern portion, the area where I'd indicated there was significant or fill beyond allowable limits that was not known previously. You can see that in the figure in this buffer zone here. Oh, sorry. Whereas in BB prime, which goes to the northeast corner, there is a minor amount of fill beyond the allowable limits that is, as I said before, currently being pulled back into the landfill footprint. When looking at these proposed top of waste contours, it's been deliberately chosen at this time to pull back this waste contour in cross section AA, create this bench because of the vegetation on this F-ball already in place, and the fact that that waste was placed a significant amount of time ago, it's not envisioned that it would be moved back into the footprint. If, however, the ministry in time deems that's a requirement. The reason this blue contour ends here is to allow for this lower portion to be removed, brought back into the footprint, and then the contour line would transect down from this intersection down to the point here, creating or maintaining the 4:1 side slopes that are required for a landfill. When this overfill material on cross-section B prime is removed and brought back into the waste footprint, then the proposed top of waste contour would go from the intersection point here down to the edge of the landfill footprint. Because of the delay potential and the challenge of following along, is there any questions at this point on this cross-sectional figure?
Are landfills outside the boundary twice or once?
So it's outside the boundary. When the staking was done, it was outside the boundary twice for Bear Creek, but it was known already for the northeast. So this small portion that was the case, and Dan and Chris, and from a landfill operation perspective, they were working on removing it and pulling it back, so that's already in place. And I will show you in the cut and fill figure later in the presentation what that actually means and what the impact of that is. So the next figure is looking at the cell sequencing that is proposed, and these cells are approximately 25 meters wide and 75 meters long. Ultimately, the purpose of these is to minimize the active space and to allow standard compaction moving forward once the active area is defined or the cell is defined for ease of operation. It is proposed to put this current phase for 2020 to 2023, or 2022 rather, for the year 1 to year 3 portion in the northeast end of the site, and then moving outward or downward to the central portion of the site, and then then to the future phase 1. The part of the reason for that is to allow time to clear for this site this area, because some of it is wooded and needs to have that vegetation removed, and then to come back into main portion of the site, which is the future phase 2, and lastly to fill in the lower portion of the site. These are the new proposed final contours of waste for Bear Creek, and ultimately what we did was we took the previously approved contours and adjusted them so they were a bit more not routine, but just the previous one had a couple of mounds outside, and it wasn't a typical pyramid with the top cut off, which is what this is proposed to be. And as per the requirements, the upper portion is with a 5% slope, and then the side slopes are proposed at 4:1 as per the best management practices and the requirements of the ministry. When we look at this, what we did was we took the overall approved capacity for the site of 40,000 cubic meters and looked at the last full survey of the site and did the comparison to determine what the remaining capacity was. And when we look at the fill and cut figure, what we see here is similar to what we had discussed before. Anything in red is a cut. So the slopes need to be pulled back in the material. So ultimately, what Dan has been working on most recently is to pull this material beyond the footprint, as well as the material in red along here, back into the areas where there is the capacity. And in this top area, this site where the green fill contours are, there are up to 4 or 5 meters of fill potential in this upper zone for the site in here. There are some minor cuts that need to be made along this edge, which will be relatively simple to do over time. And then in here along this edge, again, there are some minor cuts, but the overfill amount was mainly here. When we look at the available space in the landfill, it was 20,165 cubic meters. Removing the overfill amount that is now being brought back into the landfill, that means that the net available space is 17,135, which ties out similarly to the 2019 active survey deduction, where I believe it was 17,009 cubic meters remaining. So on the plus side, this means that the information available and the active area surveys are fairly accurate in what it's indicating for your remaining lifespan. The challenge or the reduction in your capacity comes from the fact that although we're not proposing that this eastern fill beyond allowable limits be brought back into the waste footprint, it does have to be deducted from your available space or your available capacity. So that means that there is an impact to your net available space within the site, because this F-ball was unknown at the time of the 2019 report. So that means that you have 13,355 cubic meters of remaining capacity at Bear Creek. And that translates to a number of years that was reported in the 2019 report of 37 years, and it reduces it by to 29 years based on the average annual consumption rate of 457 cubic meters.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, was where they went to the east, that where there were the old stuff, how was that determined by test holes or mapping it?
No, when the survey stakes were put in the spring for the footprint outline, the one that would have been, the one that would have been in this corner, the one in the middle, and the one here, then it was determined that this is obviously in the buffer zone and not in the footprint as what I would imagine was originally envisioned when this waste was placed.
Yeah. I just wondered how you determined the size of it if there was vegetation.
Based on the assumed ground elevation from historical surveys that we have.
And the old topo surveys?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Because most of this area would have been approximately flat before waste was placed on it, or it was assumed to be relatively flat in this area to make that determination.
And if I could ask a second question, on your first diagram, it showed rock outcroppings. I was wondering about, has there been anything tested to see if there's any rock outcroppings in the middle of this area?
In the waste footprint, there are not any waste outcropping, bedrock outcrops. There are in the buffer zone. When Lisa, myself, and our CAD designer went with Dan and were looking and walked in the buffer zone to look at the survey stakes, there is some minor bedrock outcropping at this edge, but it doesn't impact your overall capacity because that's already considered in the base survey. There would be no additional waste placed along this western edge anyway. It has some minor cut that needs to be done, so it's not affecting the overall remaining airspace.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. We're just going to switch to Wolf now, and so this is starting with figure A1, and on this particular figure you will see, similar to Bear, there are stakes that were placed in key areas where possible in the corners, but ultimately in this corner it's defined by the well, and this corner is still to be confirmed. There is internal stakes that were completed in the active areas to allow operations to confirm where they are in relation to what will be the proposed final contours. This site has an approved capacity of 54,770 cubic meters. And in 2019's report, I believe had 119 year remaining capacity based on 399 cubic meters of annual consumption a year. Looking at the cross sections, these cross sections A to A prime go from southeast to northwest, southwest to northeast, and then B is from northwest to southeast. So we're going to have a look at these particular cross sections. And what you will see here is there's no fill beyond the allowable limits in A to A prime, so from southwest to northeast. And as a result, it's a relatively simple exercise to overlay the proposed top of waste contours. When we're looking at cross-section B prime, what we notice is that when you get to the southeast corner, it just magically appears that we are at the limit of the waste, right at the limit of the footprint. But that is all based on the assumed original ground information that we have. I'm just going to go back to the first figure, because what we are aware of is in that particular area. So this is the cross section B prime. So this is the area where magically things all seem to work out. When we were on site with Dan, what we noticed is that sorry, I've lost my cursor. Sorry. This area here was an area where plastics or materials were placed for storage, and they were going to be shredded, and they should be brought back into the waste footprint. It's not a significant amount of material, but there is currently waste in, in this area here that does need to go back into the footprint, but it's not envisioned to be a significant quantity that would affect your overall lifespan of the landfill.
Is that waste that's going to be ground up?
My understanding, and Lisa, I'm not sure, or Dan, if you can speak to it, it's previously been ground and it was stockpiled there in 2019. I think when we were there 6 weeks ago, it was noted that some of that material had just been pushed or spread out in the area rather than being pulled into the landfill footprint. But at that time, the landfill footprint wasn't staked, so it would not have necessarily been known that that material was beyond the footprint itself. So I don't think it's a significant quantity, and it wouldn't be onerous from an operations perspective to slowly over the next 2 years, or do it at one particular time period to put that into the active area of the landfill itself.
Thank you.
So looking at the phasing for this particular site, so Wolf Lake, the cell dimensions are approximately the same, approximately 25 meters by 75 meters. It's proposed to start in the current area where there is active, in an area just to the north of where the active area is. And this is to allow the main portion of the site to become built up, and then the next phase would be for years 11 to 15 to come towards the south, and then go to the side slopes on future phase 1, then come out and fill from east to west for future phase 2, and then finish up on the side slopes on future phase 3. This is a revised proposed top of waste contour figure for Wolf, and ultimately the same thing. Some of the contour lines were smoothed out, or the contouring changed to provide the pyramid with the cutoff top. And as you can see here, this is the slope break where the top portion is at 5%, and then there is a 4-to-1 slope around the rest of the site as required by the ministry. For Wolf, on a cut and fill perspective, ultimately the remaining available space is 45,620 cubic meters, which translates to 125 years of life, which is approximately 6 additional years from what was reported in the 2019 report. On this particular site, there are no cut areas, but on the side slopes, particularly in this area, and I believe down here, there is minimal fill requirements that operationally you just need to be aware that surveying should be conducted on a routine basis if you are actively in those cells. That is the other reason why we propose to do the main filling for now in this area, because that is the area with the most capacity. There was one additional thing I wanted to mention from a recommendation perspective. I support the operational recommendation to move to monthly compaction, but the additional recommendation I would make is that it not just be the active area that be compacted on a monthly basis. And I'm just going to quickly flip back to Bear Creek. Because there's a significant amount of activity in this area where the material is being removed and brought back into the active area, it would be beneficial for this this side slope to be compacted at the same time as the active area on site, so that you can obtain the most airspace available to you. And because any disturbance of that area will just mean that any previous compaction becomes removed, or that there is the potential for that material to no longer be as compacted as it possibly could be. With that recommendation, we would also recommend that a full site survey be conducted at Bear because of this and sort of the footprint and area, so that it can be confirmed that everything in this overfill location can be confirmed that it has been removed and pulled back into the active area, and where there is the room for operations to continue to go upwards, so that then there is sufficient space to apply interim cover and finish the compaction of those side slopes until such time as the final cover is applied.
Can I ask the question again, please? Sorry.
Oh, yes, no problem.
What, have you any studies done to determine the maximum amount of waste that can be compacted efficiently?
So ideally, the reason the cells are being proposed as 25 meters wide and 75 meters long is ideally you would have a minimum of 2 meters of waste before they're compacted. But there is a limitation on, there are two ways to do this. Is one, if you have a compactor on site, you would make your cell size much smaller because it's easier to get a 2 meter lift depending on the quantity of waste you're bringing in. However, if there's not a compactor available on site for daily compaction or weekly compaction, then the cell size has been expanded to allow for sufficient waste to be received to get to that 2 meter lift, ideally before compaction occurs.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Okay, I'm just going to quickly scroll through these figures again, and that is basically all we had. So any other questions?
Yeah. I have a question. On your B2, I'm just trying to make sure that I understand this right. The red line on the B2 map is the current level. True?
Yes, so B is, I'll just go back to it. It's
So the B and then the blue would be the maximum height.
yes.
Okay, so I just by ball parking here, we only got 4 more meters high to go and then we're done.
Yes.
At Clear Creek.
Yep.
Just to put that in perspective, that's not very much. 7 years out of that is whatever. I'm really thinking 5-6 years.
So that's just one cross-sectional piece, though. When you take it across the whole entire site,
As it goes up, it gets smaller and smaller, your footprint. Right?
Right, but you have to consider the fact that
the less you got, you only got 4 meters. I don't see it, but maybe I'm not good enough in math to figure that out.
Right, so if we took the fact that on average, horizontally, the blocks are 12 and a half meters, or 2 blocks are 25 meters. We have 25, 50, 150. Let's say from the 75 line here on A prime to the 150 line, the average height in here is 3.25 meters. From a volume perspective, and I'm just going to try and do a little math here. That's 150 less 75 is 75. 75 times 3.5 times cross-sectionally the other way, the distance we're talking about, which is another 75 meters. And I have done something wrong. that gives you a capacity of, just without including any side slopes, of approximately 25,000 cubic meters, which translates to 62 years. Sorry, not 62 years. On this, I think what's missing, I'm just going to go back to here, is this cross section is just looking at this particular line. You then have to extend that between approximately here to here to get the volume. 4 meters of height in one cross-sectional view, I would agree with you. If you only had a 10-meter cell across that cross-sectional line, you would only be looking for at 3 to 5 years of capacity. But because we're also talking about another 25-meter cell here and one here that has up to 5 meters, 4.5 to 5 meters of capacity in certain areas, it does translate to significantly more. Does that explain it?
Yes, because you have to deal in cubic meters in this case, right?
Yes.
And so you would have the length and the width and the height times.
Yeah.
And then if you took it times the volume, or with the space divided by the volume per year, you would get the life.
Yeah.
But as you go up, you
If I
lose.
can just add to that as well, I mean, if we're increasing compaction, because actually compaction was only being done twice a year. So if the township is moving to doing it once a month, you're going to gain additional space. So your averages will change over time and giving you more capacity. This is just taking into account current fill rates without any compaction. So.
The other concern is the glass now is going to be bulkier if we don't compact it without a lot of insulating factors around it. Because the glass and the plastics are going to add volume now that they're not recycled.
I guess
So-
the glass could be broken down and, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
and I guess the question becomes, and sorry, I might be a little bit behind here. So are there specific plastics that are coming out of the recycling program, and therefore there's an expected increase in the waste side of things?
Chris can answer that probably.
No, there's no plastics coming out of recycling, but the glass, we are looking into getting like kind of like a roll-off bin to put the glass in so we can break it down and dispose of it.
Mm-hmm. That's the best way that I'm aware to do that without having that option of recycling it.
Right. So then we'll break it down inside the bin. We'll take the bin over to the edge of the bank and dump it over.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then that'll eliminate all the volume of glass.
Are there any other questions?
I was wondering about an area that could be set aside where trees and like logs and branches and that could be stored to be further chipped. Would that have to be within the footprint? If we were to store it, say, and chip it once a year to create mulch for the landfill?
I just happened to end on the figure for Wolf, and so no, if the buffer area is cleared, that material can also be stored in the buffer area. For Bear Creek, the challenge is that most of the buffer area is still quite vegetated, except for to the far east. So it can be stored just generally on site as long as there's a clear open space to do so, so that the stockpile is one, easily accessible. It's just determining what the best place is to put it from an operations perspective, from an ease of access, as well as you don't want to be going from one end of the site once you've chipped the material to where you're actually going to place it or use it for cover. But there's no requirement to have it on the waste footprint itself. It just needs to be within the overall buffer.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
So you're suggesting at Wolf that we do a survey to confirm that we haven't gone out of the footprint?
Not for wolf, for bear. The survey that's recommended for that is because there is material that has gone beyond the footprint and that is actively being removed and pulled back into the footprint, to confirm that that has all been completed, so that there are no remaining cuts to be made, is what's suggested. For this, for wolf, this area that has waste in it that is relatively minor, it should be fairly simple to just remove it and pull it back. I don't think a survey is needed unless it was determined during the operations portion of that the waste is significantly deeper than anticipated, and then that would be something that we would just recommend, not necessarily a survey, but just some quick test bits be done to confirm the depths of the waste.
Okay, and would we, within a year, 2 years, would we see if the compacting monthly is working? How soon would we know that?
Yeah, I would say that within 2 years you would know what the impact or the positive outcome, hopefully, of compaction would be. The one thing that needs to also be tracked is the number of bags or loads of waste that are being brought to the site, because there is variability in what is accepted at both sites year by year, and therefore an example I would give is for another small municipal client that has a very rural landfill. We had done a survey, and they had been doing compaction, but their volumes were significantly increased from the previous year, and we had to do a bit more of a deeper dive, and it turned out that they had had an agreement with a local owner of a motel when the motel was demolished, that the waste was brought to the site. So that was an unusual volume of waste and a one-time event that meant that particular year, no matter what compaction they were doing, their actual volume of waste brought in was significantly more than would be normal. So those sorts of things are key for obviously the township to keep track of, but also for us to be aware of if there's anything unusual in a given year that's being accepted, or an agreement has been made to accept an additional waste volume, so that we can make that determination within 2 years of how effective the compaction is being.
Breathe again. At Bear Creek, I don't know why would we need another survey. Like when we dug the garbage back, I offset the property bar so I could place it back to where it was. And the other two were in the bush that no one has disrupted.
Yeah, I think it's not just about the stakes, it's about confirming the cut amounts on this particular figure that in some cases, I'm not sure this is going to work. No, it's not. In some cases, we're talking about, you know, half a meter of cut. In other cases, we're getting close to 2 meters of cut in this area. And the purpose of the survey is to confirm that sufficient cut within the footprint was completed, not only that this material beyond the footprint has been removed and brought back in.
Okay.
Well, if there are no more questions, thank you very much for your time, and we appreciate being able to provide this update to you. And let us know if you have any other questions that come up after that we can address.
We appreciate your time and your helpful hints, and again, if we do have any other questions, I'm sure Dan, Chris, or Charles will be asking them. Thank you very much, and good night.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Good night.
Night.
Are we back on?
It just doesn't show because there's been a We're still on YouTube. We're still on.
Yes. You're just cautioning me, aren't you? That was great advice at the beginning, and I'm sure we'll all take it. And I know you have some different questions from this material. If you read I guess last time we asked about a short report. This is the short report, and I think you've all got it. Line footprint staking, dispels, cell sequencing. So read it, it's actually good reading. And if you really liked it, that's the report there. And we asked him, and he has read it now, the long report.
This is Bear Creek. This is
Is there anything of interest in there that we haven't already?
well, this the groundwater studies. Using the dump footprint and the groundwater outside of the dump area. Of interest with the conclusions. What, as we all know, there's a lot of iron in our water. There's a lot of iron in your test. Not related to landfill operation because of the amount of water. All the ones along the highway that we, there's elevated chloride because of the from the highways. That was just of interest. A lot of salt on the highway.
The other thing I wasn't aware of, when we were doing that day, they're test here. But I mean, they're testing really close to this building for our landfill. That's how spread out all these test sites are, like literally miles away. See what impact is. We weren't aware of until they got an overhead in that study that shows all these test holes, basically all over the country.
And there's more maps showing where all the tests. Once you read the detailed one, then the actual, because they have all the ones outside the site showing where they are too. All the testing that they do the water. This all goes to the ministry for their. I've now read it. Dan, I think, is read it too.
Not as quite as much as you, but.
I know. jobs now than need to.
You just highlighted.
Right.
Okay, great. Big on highlight. So,
But after reading this was not new to
How much does the survey cost us extra above and beyond what we're already paying?
Like, I don't, that survey she's proposing, I'm not sure, I don't know what that's gonna be.
How much did the survey cost us this year?
Now, the survey had the landfill staked was $6,500 per landfill.
And that's above what we already paid them.
Yeah.
And-
You know, 'cause we were running on, I was running on secondhand information where the balance.
No,
I'm just saying, so that's why we went with that, but then we also, every year they do their elevation survey. That's kind of what she's talking about. Near the end there, she wants to reshoot the elevations.
And have they changed their protocols then on how/when they're going to do the annual tests? I know that in some of the stuff that we've already read, it showed that there was a huge difference year to year because it wasn't compact.
I think we're gonna implement that and we're gonna have it, so like, we're gonna make the end of November, it'll compacted, ready for them to, that'll be every year, like November, pick a date, and it works, and so then there's no snow interference, there's no, you know,
No, exactly, and that's.
no, so we're gonna implement that, we're gonna tell them that we want them there November, say 20th. And we'll have it compacted and every year, so we know it'll be a true accurate measurement of how much waste is coming into the land.
And then you're comparing apples to apples.
and that's one of the recommendations. And they recommend that all future survey and those places also be completed following compaction operations where similar conditions are achieved for comparison purposes. So that's in the recommendations.
Now, she also talked tonight about bag counts.
That was new.
No, I don't think that's what she meant. Like, say they school down and they brought all that waste to our landfill, that would be a major, that's what she means, like, she wants to say some major volume of.
No, she talked about the major as well, but she said that we needed to do bag counts.
yeah, compare bag count to their measurements.
Yeah, I mean,
So my
Kind of
concern
jump
is
from
how are
bag
we
count
measuring
to-
now?
Jump from bag count to like
To the net, in some other
I
communities.
mean, we're not doing a bag count now because it was part of the survey to shoot to see volume. It's supposed to be more accurate volume.
That would be my suggestion, right? If we're doing it properly, like you're suggesting, if we do it every November after it's been compacted and we have all the same conditions,
Right.
we'll definitely know. And
And then-
if we're not gonna- because my bag can be half full, but her bag is completely full. That bag is not giving you any reliable information at all.
And so if there is any significant waste coming in, we will document that. Then we will know why it's elevated, but typically I haven't seen much. You know, we don't do many demos out here and but it's gonna get tougher to say no out here because North Bay's now rejected. You better have documentation from where that house is coming from, and if it's outside of North Bay or town.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Tom.
Just wondering why we're picking November the way it's been the last couple of years, and also we go to compacting monthly, it wouldn't matter. It'd be any time after a monthly compaction. I can't see going into November the way it's been the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, we're just throwing a month out. I mean, nothing's been written in stone yet.
We need to get numbers for our auditor.
I think closest to year end would be the best. And November, well, we really pick mid-November, there's usually not any snow.
No.
Winters will beg to differ, but whatever.
I mean, you can pick the end of October. You know,
Then you're 2 months away from your year end,
right.
so you don't have your totals, so you're guessing, you know, what we're gonna have the next 2 months.
And we can have snow in October too. I mean, I think you can pick your date that you.
I think if we compact on a certain, a certain date every year when they come to shoot it, it's gonna work out. to a true
And
number.
if there's an abnormal amount of snow or something, you would document that.
Right.
Well, you want an annual amount. So if you start every October, then you just keep going October. November, we've had snow and frozen the last couple of years in November.
Okay, are there any other questions? Because we'll work on that date and when we can do that, whatever. Now, we didn't do an RFP or anything like that because we wanted to see what they came up with tonight. And we wanted to see this report. They're standing by their years, even despite your question, you know, and I know how a pyramid goes. It gets smaller as it goes, but they're talking about the cells that we haven't used yet. That's still something we can look at. The only problem that has been discussed is anybody new is going to start over brand new. They can't use any of the ACOM's material. They can't use any of their drill sites. They can't use any of their wells. So basically, they're going to double in cost what we have right now. It's just like we can't use our rink anymore, so now we're going to have to build a new rink. It'd be a huge cost, and ACOM is under contract till 2 more years. 3 more years. So that's the only thing. We can get an RFP, but anybody that's coming in and say, we got to start brand new. You know,
Haven't you paid for the wells?
I mean, we've paid for them, but I don't know if the data, I don't know if we share their data with somebody else. Okay, that's what we don't know.
They're sharing.
Again, I don't know the differences.
Do you know if that's public or if that's?
As far as I'm concerned, it's public.
Well,
Anybody can come in and read them.
Yeah, so therefore we can.
It's our report.
but if we go to Fry's or something like that, can they just use our wells? Know what I mean?
Is ACON actually doing the testing or are they selling it into some local?
I think that it's their guys. They come from Toronto, yeah. But I would think our wells are our wells.
Yeah.
Not paid for them. I mean, they can sample the water. We don't sample. I'm not saying, we say, we think they're gonna sample the water and we have the previous studies to compare numbers.
I don't know, I'm just concerned, again, tonight when they did their presentation, I really don't feel like they were even that certain about the numbers. And then they're trying to do calculations, they couldn't do calculations. I don't know, I don't have a good confidence level with them based on what we're actually seeing and what they're producing.
Well, it wouldn't hurt to see the second thing cost, yeah, especially if they can use their information.
If they can use our information. So that's key. And if we can find that.
They may actually do that in some, probably other people legally what we do. And then what is it really?
Right.
Well, I mean, we see the second where it is ours, so I can see what.
I'm trying to make it as simple because we have to understand it as much as the layperson. So you say 4 meters in the middle, that's 12 feet. It doesn't take long, over 2 acres, but it's 12 feet is your tallest point. Down on the other side is 0.
No contours like that. And the depth for the whole thing. So we sat down with a calculator. She was calculating.
Yeah, she was
doing a strip across the center, but she calculated squares.
Yeah.
The contours at the side, that would go down, like, she did 5 years for one section. So there's like 5 sections, so it's going to be. Nice.
So like maybe some of our corners that we're at now might be at their maximum.
Well, you know where the electronic bin is? Cut like 8 inches off that.
The minus one where we have to cut.
Yes, and all the red figures, we have to cut
If
that
the
back.
figures are red, that means that has to be pulled in.
Just so,
And then, and also I think she mentioned that the plastics, which is quite a huge volume, and we were gonna use it for cover, right? Is that what you said initially?
Like the shred, yes.
Yeah, we're gonna use it for cover, that it's not gonna take up much room, but I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, so that shred pile you see, that probably gets reduced down to that, or that shred. No, I get it, but I mean, it's still, it's there, it's,
is that the point where she's outside the boundary?
where the old shred pile was, yes, that's,
So in past practice, is some of that been just left there? Or is it always been moved over? We don't know.
you don't know.
Anyways, I just think that there's enough concern about, you know, what we're getting from this company and them not, as James put it, putting it in a way that we all understand and believe it. Because at the end of this,
That's why I'm confident. I received, you know, what's happening. It's up to us to interpret what the.
Sorry, I'm only getting about half of it.
She was asking to do. Confirm that we have moved it in. As we said, we've done.
And I think what ultimately she was shooting for there was, we moved it in, but we just didn't hump it up right there and come exceed the height limit at that point.
How confident do you feel that you have 29 years left at?
If it's household,
If it's household, I think, knowing what I know now and doing what we plan on doing, I think we can achieve it. But it's gonna take some discipline and it's household. Recycling is gonna have to be clamp down on recycling and compact. That's the idea, we could go with compacting. But yeah, right now, I think if we jump on it, now, we could potentially get that done.
Well, we should be able to get that down to landfill.
Yes.
We should be able to achieve that.
We start watching, limit the number of vehicles in at a time and watch what's going on. And, you know, sorry, that's recycling, that's gotta go. If you don't want to sort it, take it with you.
what about the glass?
I'm looking into getting, I priced roll-off bins for like, you know how they have the garbage, but they're pretty expensive, so I have a local company pricing out making bins. Not as fancy as a roll-off, so we can crush the glass inside there and then drag it over to the edge and dump it.
We would have to go back to kind of glass recycling again.
it's sorting.
Yes, not exactly sorting, so it's out of the garbage. And you know, it's there, we can break it down, so it's not taking up airspace.
We'll have to be careful because you can't call it recycling if you're not
No.
recycling.
Glass sorting,
We'll call
and
it
then
diversion.
recycling.
Yeah.
That's the version.
Eventually, we're gonna take the box off the old dump truck. Would that suffice eventually?
No, because I'm putting it on another dump truck. I have been looking on easy and stuff for dump truck boxes because it would work perfect, and I don't need a piece one.
I just want a species right now.
So
Steel one.
yeah, I can call them and see, I mean, that's gonna be the cheapest option ultimately, but I've been looking and I haven't seen any. So,
We're in there today and there's one sitting there.
okay, well, I'll call them tomorrow, and see what it's worth, and then we just have to, you know, it'll be a little cost to buy that and then float it out compared to.
Just price of scrap, whatever he's charging.
So that was ultimately the best option. That is the cheapest option.
And so what's our plan then, for like starting our new protocols, starting the new?
Sign is made and then we'll, I mean, we have the landfill attendants. Tracking, recycling and watch what's being thrown in and making sure it's going to the right places.
But before that, we need to let the public know, let everyone know, and get a little bit of input into it so that, right?
I think having a second landfill attendant there, this could be recycled. Well, not could be, it needs to be recycled. Try to educate them first that way before we get tough on it.
But I
We
think,
can do a mail out,
right, I think that,
explaining to everybody what we're going to do, and how we're going to funnel the traffic through, and our reasons for doing it, and what we can achieve with it. We put that into a mail, I'm pretty sure.
As you come in, it's gonna be big and bold.
right, I did put a thermometer up to show how many years we have and then move it as we move. Like once we get information, add to it, because I think a visual for people to see the impact that they're having, positive or negative, right? Because right now, it's just a dump. It's not a landfill and it's not anything we have to concern ourselves with. Out here who do that.
Right.
But if people get to know and understand, I mean, I certainly understand think more about landfill now than I ever thought in my life I would. And I,
No.
exactly, yeah, so, yeah. So anyways, that, my hope is that we are able to do a full like market blast on this thing and really teach our community how important it is and what initiatives we are taking and what we're hoping to gain out of each of those specific initiatives. And then let them watch it on, you know, so that they can see the end result. The outcomes.
Investment in
We have to.
Right,
Yeah.
it's gone, it's gone.
Well, I think with that though, you should say something like, this is what it costs if that dump closes, that landfill closes, it's gonna cost you $1 million or 20 million, and every taxpayer's taxes will go up 30%.
Right.
Because there's a lot of guys that are gonna look and say, 27 years, this, I'll be long gone, who gives a shit? And we can't do that. We really have to think of the future generations and how long we can, you know, prolong the end of this dump, you know? And we had the same discussion with Blossom because their dump is huge on a great huge hill and they've got 100 and some years. But no, you don't. Back down to it. So we have to think of that, and that has to win because 27 years is still too long. And if you said 100 on the other, you're not going to look at that closes in 27.
Right.
Now
Sure,
we're down
cut in
to
half.
that. So we can get that in. And I think we can do a good job with that. And then with the signage. Yeah. And, you know,
And with the education.
But I think it also has to happen at once. I think if you run it out in dribs and drabs, well, we'll start the glass, and then we're gonna start a number of bags, and then we're gonna put some signage out, and then we're gonna, I think you lose the impact and the effect that you're gonna be able to generate if you tell them all, this is how important, this is the magnitude of what we've been working on and what we're doing. I feel like you're gonna get more buy-in. You'll never get 100%.
And that's why we're trying to get all the pieces lined up,
Yeah,
so
that's what
we can't do that at once.
So, yeah, that one.
My other concern would be the landfill staff, the verbal abuse that they're going to get.
Right.
Could we put, I know that in the landfill document you mentioned, you know, we get pretty hardcore with them for anybody that verbally abused the staff. Could we have signage right when they check in, something there that,
We
yes,
talked about that, and it's gonna be big and bold too.
that's great.
Because we have a policy that we've had to meet specifically for the treatment of the landfill.
Because they need to be.
And if they have any problems, they can contact the office. We would do.
Call the police.
I remember when the changes first started.
Yeah, and, you know, we talked about.
Or explaining our changes and plans.
I'm thinking you're gonna put a sign up. The big sign, you know, constantly change the message. 2-bag limit. Staff is not your
Punching bag.
punching bag, something that we can, you know, change. If you make a permanent sign, you make a permanent sign.
You can't have a 2-bag limit at a time.
It's a lot of money, but
Well, the permanent signs might be the basic, the basis. This is what we have to have. And then we may end up going to that sign if we have to go to bag limits and, you know, increase fines or something like that. But we can go with what we have now to start.
Right.
And it'll say no verbal abuse, and then it might be, you have a lifetime suspension, not a year.
Right.
And we may have to change it as we go, or as the situation changes. So you're right, it might be, have to be a sign like the fire department has.
We had talked about that.
I don't know how much it costs, but
We had talked about some kind of a, not a live sign, but one that we could alter on the building.
Yeah, like
Close to the
a-
building, so that when they're being stopped originally, then they would catch them.
They're digital, because the digital ones are pretty, they're getting pretty cheap, and you can change the message on it.
It's probably accurate.
Yeah, that's,
Right. And
Kind
kind of,
that sign you want, you know, one that they have in Boston?
I don't know about the dark sky.
no, Chris and I have we've been throwing lots of ideas around about it, so just trying to narrow it down now.
Can I ask a question?
We can.
Councillor Marchand?
Yeah, sorry, I'm only hearing about half, but I can't, I was trying to understand what you were talking about, 2 bags. You're talking about 2 bags a visit?
That was discussed. Nothing's being formalized with that. It will depend on how we do in the meantime with our initial rollout.
You come in good then, because like myself, I only go about every 2 or 3 months.
Yeah,
Because of the,
I think down the, if we do go with the bags, it's gonna be a yearly limit, not weekly.
what-
104 bags a year, and if you bring 20 bags, you get 20 clips on that one.
yeah, it can't be that per visit.
It won't be per visit.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Okay.
The audio was terrible. Ask John Paul if he bought the microphone at the dollar store.
You like the
I
bit
thought
where
of
he
it,
gets-
I thought of that at a musical store.
Okay, so I think we've got, I hate yelling. I think we've got as much as we will. We've, again, discussed this, and I think we've got some really good ideas to move ahead. And again, we can definitely, I think, if you're not confident, we just see what else is out there and what else we can find out. And because again, the tone I'm getting is we're still not confident, a number of us, after what AECOM had to say today. So we can look at what it would cost and also what happens with their contract with them, if we're contract whatever for 3 more years. So these are things that we have to look at. And we have a little time before the next meeting. Hopefully we can have it for then. So what we will do now is go to staff reports. And when we look at staff reports, we have Dan McGinnis. And if you look at this, you have any questions for Dan? One question I have is, when you did the culverts, replaced them on Ski Hill, did you have excess materials in the dig out, and did it go to the dump or someplace?
Yeah, it went to Wolf Lake, and right now, just because it was short haul, but now the guys are transferring it to Bear Creek so we can finish off the back where we move the garbage. But yes, everything went to Wolf Lake.
Okay.
But just to touch on that, that stuff that I brought in is nasty, rocky. That's why I had problems in the road. So I talked to a local contractor, and I got a good price on landfill, the landfills. So we're not bringing rocks and stuff into the fill areas, so it'll save space and it's cheap, so.
Not gonna compact or off.
No, it's just taking up space.
Good,
Oh,
that's,
I forget, Dan, are the air conditioners turned on? in these?
Yeah,
Great, thank you. I know they were installed, I wasn't sure if they were.
yeah, no, we turned them on the day before.
Wonderful.
any other questions? And the next one I have in no particular order is John Paul Magnatis. Just, I didn't see this before I got here tonight. But if you've had a chance, we've had a lot of discussion with Blue Sky recently, and they're working on our behalf again. And I know Councillor Scott pointed out tonight that there are a few different broadband and towers in our area. I don't think in our actual Nipissing area, but there are some in the Blue Sky area that are going to come online shortly. But it's good that those of you that participated in the speed test. And if you have any questions, please ask John Paul, because he's dying to answer them. Yes. And then, Chris, I have your staff report.
It was just in response, you asked about the impact on the budget.
Right.
And everything else that I did, the newsletter and other things.
So,
Can I just ask a question, operating question, actually, which is more about now that we have 2 full-time employees, have sick replacement and vacation replacement?
Not yet, because we haven't approved the full time, but once we have that done, then we'll work on that.
So then we have to hire another half-time or third-time.
Not necessarily, we still have to talk about what resources that we have.
So this isn't the real complete cost, this is just,
That's just for that one employee.
right,
That's
so
our
there's
next step.
still more costs coming.
Always, yeah.
okay, and the newsletter is in here.
Yeah.
So that's under 14, so we can look at it then. So we'll go to Dale Martin.
The museum, the groundwork, and the walkways are all complete. And they look good there.
Really good.
And everything seemed to work out at that meeting. The draft voting bylaw. Everybody has a paper, red lined and yellow lined version. We had one public meeting. Staff have gone over from that public meeting and added more or have things changed because of the public meeting. So this is the newest version that we ask you if you have any other comments. The final draft, and then when we are able to have a public meeting, open house, you know, this is online. And if people have lots of time to read it, and then we have an open house, they'll be have awareness of what's in it. Always keep in mind that own best the reasoning behind some things, because our official plan is made up from municipal policy statement, this municipal affairs ministers additions to it. So some things are in here because minister said you have to have it in there. For one example will be the lake next to Flynn. It's drastically changed. It will basically not allow development in floodplain, which would make sense, right? But that's a minister's modification to our official plan, so we have to put it into our zoning plan. Things like that. But any questions, comments? We would like to get a final draft, so we can publish it on our website. The mapping has been redone. I think Tom Marchant will agree that it's a lot more representative of the wetlands and municipality. We went through all developed lots just to make sure that looked at carefully. New development, like I say, if somebody wanted to create new lots, we never looked at those type of lots. Except that, now, they probably take a study. In the existing lot, we looked at a lot closer and made sure that it's built. So, John Paul and myself were both fairly familiar with the documents. We can only one of us with questions. Everybody sees the annual landfill reports. They're available down to us. We have 2 copies, so if you want to take them out and first come as a group, each have a copy. We'll also print them off though. The office modifications will be done tomorrow. We were waiting for the glass dividers. And, what we may do for the newsletter, get it all changed. Put the opening date for the office into that newsletter that we sent. The other recommendation I think I've asked for change is the recommend that people pay electronically. Like we will take cash, debit, checks, but it's in this situation we're recommending to pay electronically online in the newsletter. I think
I put that in there.
that already
Yeah, I already printed these.
that's for tonight.
Any questions? Charles? Okay, well, we'll move on to committee reports. We'll start with Councillor Miller.
We should open to meet, get together with these before we haven't had a meeting in a while. And to make preparation for open and library board.
Any questions, Councillor? Councillor Marchant, anything to report?
Nothing in the past, but I have a planning board meeting on the 25th. We have about 16 or 18 applicants to go over.
How are you going to have that meeting?
Now it's going to be at 250 Clark spread out, and only 2 people allowed in plus the committee.
That should be entertaining. I wait to hear your next report.
Yes, there's actually going to be a volunteer fireman at the door checking as Will did.
Good, thank you. Councillor Anderson. Except cottages and camps are open.
Cottages and camps are open and COVID subcommittee is closed.
Nick is saying open for business.
They're open for business.
Okay. Councillor Scott. And we go to me. I have East Home meeting tomorrow. And we can all look at the lake levels if you want. And they're supposedly stable now. And they have, believe it or not, opened the dams, dropped the lake level, because there were complaints because of the wave action last Wednesday and Thursday. But they're taking it very tentatively because according to the weather network, it's going to be a long, dry summer. So they don't want to drop the lake too far and then not have enough water in August and September. So that's it. And like I said, East Home meeting tomorrow. And I think I mentioned that I probably didn't mention online that we start interviewing for administrators for East Home starting this week. So recommendations there in a week. So, oh, and I'm so sorry, Will.
We're good. I'll email it.
Okay. Everything's good?
I'll email it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Nothing like a good email staff report. Thank you, Will, and I apologize for forgetting. So let's move on to number 5. Only an hour and a half in, and we're at number 5 already. So That's number R 2020-116, and that's the minutes. So would somebody care to move? Councillor Anderson, seconder, Councillor Scott, thank you. So number R 2020-116, moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Scott, that the minutes of the meeting held June 2nd, 2020 be adopted as published. All in favor? Councillor Marchand?
Yes.
All in favor? Carried. Guess if we get Councillor Marchand's camera on, we can just see if he held his hand up, but if we can see him. Oh, I can see him, but he'd have to put it over his face. Just
I'm here.
here. Hey, and I'm glad that our road superintendent's still here, because number 6 is landfill compacting cost estimates for 2020. A resolution to that. Okay. See, I'm almost 7 feet tall, so that means that we're certainly 6 feet apart here if you're watching at home. So that we approve the estimated expense of $18,375 for landfill compaction and cover material for the remainder of 2020.
That includes the cover material?
That's pretty good.
Oh, for the remainder of this year, so that's
For the
not for
remainder.
6 months. Wait. I was all excited there for a second.
Yeah, quit patting yourself in the back, but still that's pretty good, you know? So we need, and I mean, there's only one compactor, so that's it. So we need a mover, Councillor Scott, and a seconder, Councillor Moore. And does anybody have any questions for Dan about that?
That's based on once a month for both?
Correct. It's split the day up. It's a full day, but five hours at each landfill.
Great.
And then you'll see how it works and how compaction works and.
Right. I mean, I think that report 2 meters high on the garbage was a bit high. We doing that? We wouldn't hit that in a month anyways.
Right.
We're gonna keep it lower so we get a better compaction. Spread it out more and then, yeah.
Perfect. So number R 2020-117, moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Moore, that we approve the estimated expense of $18,375 for landfill compaction and cover material for the remainder of 2020. Councillor Marchand?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. And number 7, amended position description for a laborer landfill site attendant from casual to full-time. We,
So I took the part-time position, the full-time. That's the only change to the actual description, same job. Before it was a part-time description. Have a full-time position. And then that'll allow me to do the full-time person to do it. And have a proper description for the position.
so I would need a mover and a second. Right here, Councilor Anderson, thank you. Seconded by Councilor Word, it's that one. Number R 2020-118, moved by Councilor Anderson, seconded by Councilor Moore, that we amend the position description for a laborer landfill site attendant, moving it from contract casual to a full-time permanent position. All in favor? Councilor March?
Yes. Yes.
Carried. And, okay, I'll put them right there. And now we have to just give the CAO permission to do that. So I need a mover, so Counselor Scott was a near second last time. So he
I'll
will-
second.
Okay, Counselor Marchant, thank you. Number R 2021-19, moved by Counselor Scott, seconded by Counselor Marchant, that we authorize the CAO clerk to hire a full-time permanent laborer, landfill site attendant. All in favor, Counselor Marchant?
Yes.
All in favor? Carried. You certainly may.
Does this leave you short-handed again? You're kind of using him for some lawn grass cutting and the students and that.
Right,
It's just a question.
yeah, I mean, a little bit, I mean, but. Yeah. Wrong from me, put it that way.
So the student's gonna do lots of work. And so the next one, insurance renewal, I'll let Charles speak to that.
This is the renewal summary. All the pages, but what we're interested in mostly is the bottom line. And we've had a few additions since last year, like we built new value of our buildings, the landfills, they went up. But the UTV and the trailer, and we have a waste landing facility, the liability, still insurance for all of the government stuff. Anyway, the end result was, and we added also cyber insurance during the year last year. So from last year, it went to $65,693. This year's figure of $71,223 total for annual renewal. Again, I read it cover to cover. And, just have no problem with this insurance. I recommend you. Frank County Insurance.
But you're right.
Because you can go to a different broker, but it'd be the same insurance.
It'll still be
Yeah.
Frank County,
Why would it still be Frank County?
because he's the only one that does municipalities, other than municipalities can insure themselves.
We almost getting caught in that one day. Roma, sometimes called the Roma Insurance Program.
Right.
It's kind of the reciprocal. So the premiums were less, but everybody was in it as a co-insurer.
Right.
And the first year was great. And the second year, they had some big claims. I know municipalities, talk to their clerks, that they're still paying towards that reciprocal years later. So you got to watch that. And there might be another company out there that comes along, but this company has been in this for 90 plus years. We had major claims a few years ago. Tell us what it was. There was no problem, coverage for everything.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we will, look, I'm just asking the question.
No, we did.
It's been a while since we got it, but it's a hard thing to tender because you get a tender document of information that, are you really covered? I'm confident that we are covered.
The other interesting thing, Councilor Anderson, is when we were discussing fire a few years ago, that was going to go to that was a North Bay insurance company.
Right.
but it was still county insurance. It was just a different person selling it.
Right.
So and interesting at that time as well. But if we will, we need a seconder again. Okay, thank you. So Councillor Anderson and Councillor Moore. So it's number R 2020-120, moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Moore. Do we accept the 2020-21 insurance renewal as received from Frank Cowan Company? Councillor Marchand?
Yeah, though next year, I think we should be putting it out to quotes because the planning board saved 10% by switching from Cowan. But yes.
Okay. And I guess we should investigate who the planning board went to.
Now we've got better coverage at the planning board, and it was it's only $5,000 policy, but it come in at $4,500 from the other company. I can't think of the name of it, but they do municipalities.
Okay. So we've got 4 from Councillor Marchand and okay. Carried. That is interesting. Have to look into that. Okay, the next one, this is just right. And these are for our 2 stores in Nipissing Township and their ability to sell liquor
On staff holidays.
on staff holidays.
And they emailed us within minutes of each other on the same day, so it was short notice. That's why we amended the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, I see July 1st. So I need the mover for South Shore Center. Okay, so I'm going to go Councillor Anderson and Councillor Scott. So this is number R 2020-121. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Scott, that we approve South Shore Center LCBO convenience outlet to sell beverage alcohol on statutory holidays annually. All in favor? Councillor Marchand?
Yes.
Good, thank you, carried. And the other is exact, it's number 122, and it's for Foots. And moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Anderson, because Councillor Scott was too slow on the draw. Number R 2020-122, moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Anderson. We approve Foots General Store, LCBO convenience outlet to sell beverage alcohol on statutory holidays annually. All in favor, Councillor Marchand?
Yes.
Thank you. Carried. Allow to establish and regulate landfill operations. Chris Cannon.
I don't even have a copy of it. You've got all the copies up there.
You're going to get a copy. That's file on number 2020-27. Okay, so that is the definitions of waste disposal sites.
The biggest change is the enforcement portion.
That, okay,
Just to allow us to refuse the loads, and if someone, we're having problems with some people being directed where to place the waste, and they're just not.
Yeah.
And so if that happens, then we can write them up and suspend them for a month and progressive discipline.
Do we know if we can actually suspend them for a lifetime?
I don't know about that.
Yeah. They're paying their taxpayers.
No.
That would be quite a deterrent.
Well, they have to pay somebody. Well,
I'm gonna wait till I'm old.
yeah.
Or older, okay? So, mover, Councilor Scott, you're on that stuff. Good, thank you. And seconded by Councilor Anderson. To number R 2021-23. Moved by Councilor Scott, seconded by Councilor Anderson, that we pass bylaw number 2020-27, being a bylaw to establish and regulate a system for the disposal of solid waste in the defined areas of the township of Nipissing. Read a first, second, and third time and passed this 16th day of June 2020. All in favor? Councilor Marchant?
I guess so. I just would like more time to review it, but yes.
Okay, yes. Otherwise, all in favor? Carried. Okay, now, number 12. I'm gonna throw this right over to Chuck. Adopt a position description for the treasurer deputy clerk. I'll do the tree canopy. That's yours, Tom.
This is my initiative. So it's coming up to that time of the year when I was writing performance appraisals for people. I got looking at the position description of the person I was writing the performance appraisal for, and it wasn't relative. It hasn't been updated for years. Probably. So I went through it, and then I talked to my our HR person, Janet McClare, explained to her what this job entails. So we talked it over with her, and then looked around and looked at other municipalities, like the description, how a few of the words are not updated. In our case, this position is more than just the clerk, deputy clerk treasurer. 2 days a week. They're taking on a lot of my roles, say Monday and Friday, for example. I think that should be recognized in the position. And as our planner consultant realizes, small municipalities are each unique, and the jobs are often around a person, right? Because we only have 3 staff in the office, 1 part-time, 2 full-time. When you're taking the functions of like zoning, CEMC, treasurer, all these jobs, and spreading it, and the CEO, and spreading it on 2 people. So, and then we had to rewrite it, talk about it, had to interview Chris, confirm that these are indeed when I received it. I had it graded for the position. The consultant was recommending that the position be up 1 level. I mean, we have 8 positions in our township. Number 1 is number 8. 8 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. It's great because they have a schedule of things that give you points. And the points indicated that that position should be not recommending any changes to our salary grids, recommending that maybe adopt this position description And I would then make a recommendation. I do a staff report that appraisal. That one would be 6 to 7. That's
Question. Thank you. First of all, Chris, you did a wonderful job. But are you telling me that this is acting CAO for 2 days?
we cannot hear.
Time. So, I mean, I've been in the office when people say come back to Charles, or, you know, so,
On the people.
yes.
But on my not here, what happens?
So you guys can we put acting CAO in this job description? And that was
I
started.
did put it.
Yes, okay, I did read it over, sorry, it's a lot, you know, but other stuff in there too.
So Amy Charles is absent.
In my absence,
Right.
for almost those days, because it became highly obvious during this pandemic. Although I was working from home, it was also instrumental in carrying out things that were asked to be done on those days.
If John Paul is off for a couple of weeks, who takes over for him? He is acting person. So it's basically a new.
What do you mean? I'm not sure what you mean.
I'm just, I don't know, I guess I thought all along that part-time, Chris is full-time, John Paul has his role, so.
But our ongoing long-term plan, everybody is cross-trained in our municipality,
Right.
which is kind of unique. One of the reasons that the planner couldn't pass, you know, like, do some treasury duties
Right.
for that person. It's hard not to talk, when there's only 3 people, it's hard not to talk about them.
Right.
This is what happens in small
So
operations.
do we change John Paul's, because sometimes he's in there by himself, so we call him acting CAO and acting treasurer. Change his description too. I'm just a little bit confused.
I'm not saying that,
Okay.
but later in the year, I may suggest that we change planner instead of planning assistant.
Mhm.
Because I'm the one, even though I'm planner, CEO, clerk, deputy treasurer, planner, whatever, you know that I'm not going to be here in the long term, right?
Right.
And the long term of this whole position was to train people.
Mhm.
I think that Chris, when I came on back, trained as treasurer. She's one of the best treasurers in the area. She does a lot of extra duties that other treasurers don't do. No. She now is a competent treasurer. I think her next stage, this is the role more and more. I ease out. I would assume that that's a normal transition for him. Because John Paul, or the person in the planning system, will become a planner. And then after he will probably hire an office assistant. Take over the jobs like answering the phone, customer service, that sort of thing, so that the CEO, treasurer, or that person would devote themselves to that job. Planning person, that's almost a full-time job. Planning takes up a lot of time. You don't have, at the end of the day, a product to show, but it takes a lot of office time. And I think people trade our succession plan by left tomorrow. I'm confident that this value will operate perfectly. At this point, I think we recognize for pay equity purposes, some of these jobs should be recognized. That should be in the job description and recognized on the, on the.
So she should see it on those 2 days.
Well, the jobs are all intertwined into
Okay, that's what I don't understand. Is it, you,
the title isn't there, but the job description will do the other, you could say other duties as assigned, those 2 days,
right?
and you can do that.
Yeah.
But I expect it described in the job description, I expect that when I'm not there in an emergency, that person would be able to.
Right, I
Make
think
a
when you've
decision.
effectively done, if you run through with this job description, Chris, you do a fantastic job. If you run through with this, you effectively now hired a full-time CEO. You now have a CEO 5 days a week, and that's new and that's different. So if that's where we're going, I'd like to have a complete look at all 3 job descriptions myself, see what the functions are. I'd like the remunerations of those.
That would be something logically, say, I'm looking at a 2-year time frame. But if that's not, if it's not a 2-year time frame you want, then it could be a 30-day time frame. Then yes, that would be something you could do now. And then that's all that's on. Like 2 years, the time frame you're working towards with the recommendation.
It's not the day isn't compatible. It's not like Chris for 2 days gets Charles's pay. She would still stay at her level, and Charles would stay at his level, and John Paul maybe will change if he becomes planner, will change level as well. So it's
Another
Another
example is the year that the treasurer went on maternity leave. The deputy treasurer did that for a year. Don't like we have to be able to fill in and to cross-train and recognize for the jobs that we're doing.
I get it, but I'm not sure that you can change her job title.
I'm not changing the job title.
Even her duties where she is now going to be called CEO or 2 days.
Acts. And on Mondays and Fridays.
I disagree in that sense, but now we have a full-time CAO shared by 2 people, but the job share as opposed to, and I don't think that.
I don't see that. When our principal left the school at 3:30, he would say, "You're acting principal in my whatever." I had to do his job. I didn't get any recognition. I didn't get any more pay. It was just, I did that for an hour and a half.
But he would say to you, acting principal right now.
Right.
So Charles is going there, he just says it.
So Chris is.
And that was going on now, basically.
No, I see what it says on this is what we're proposing. Like, say I'm not here, you would attend the council meeting, you would supervise and guide the activities of the staff, provide leadership in the event of an emergency, and work with the mayor and council on assignments as required. That isn't all of the CEO. Those are CEO items that this job entails. Doesn't even matter if it's Monday, Friday, any day. So at any given time, this person would be doing those jobs.
So that's why I would think I need to see all the job descriptions so I can compare and figure out how are they crossing over and how are we writing it so that it is.
My job is like CEO job description. We're only adding 4 lines and read this one. But big up to you. I thought, and the reason I did it was for pay equity purposes because 2 years ago we had a huge pay equity. The municipality didn't recognize what the person was doing. That's what we did. I don't know if you were here when we had that review out. We went through job description back, maybe right back to the beginning of everything.
I agree. I think that's why we need to do a full review.
But as a CAO,
Yeah.
and that's why you kind of put me in charge of this, I thought, was to make recommendations to council and do these things. But we've just done a complete review of this in 2016, of all the jobs. All, right?
In 2016, we can add this.
And this is now 4 years later, 5, and this job has evolved into something different.
2016, the same number of hours were spent at the office by our CEO and by our treasurer.
That was more that was then. But I don't keep track of all the hours I'm on my phone. Maybe I should. But during the COVID, that's when I started keeping track of hours that I'm working at home, not at the office. And it's adding up.
Way more than 3 days.
Yeah. But I did them because I like doing it. And I wanted the township's interest. But eventually, there will be somebody you're going to have to hire a full-time CEO. And as well, work. This is the start. I'd say this council for 2 more years. Not be likely to fill out the term, but if you want to do review and hire the full-time CEO now, that it's up to you.
No, and I don't think anybody's saying that, but I think they want to see how all the jobs are intertwined here. How John
Yeah.
is CEMC, but Chris is
Yeah.
Kristen CEMC, and how is a treasurer, but a deputy treasurer, CAO, deputy clerk, and evidently you want clarity in what everybody's job is.
How do you do this while it's done?
Yeah, I know, it'll be difficult because everybody does everybody's job.
We all do. Everyone's frustrated with every job.
That's fine, and that's what we have in HR, who will then assemble and look at all of those tasks. We just want to make sure that all the tasks are covered and where they cross over is approved.
I think I've done that.
You've done that with Chris's.
No, but this kind of came out of the blue for us. I know that you've probably been working on it for a while, but it certainly came out of the blue for me. So I would like to see the
12
information.
years.
Well, again, where
12
does-
years I've been.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where John Paul falls in all of this, like taking on extra tasks.
And then what's the next step?
Well, I wasn't trying to name names for this.
Yeah.
It's the position, it's not the name. It doesn't matter who's
Yeah,
doing the
that's
job.
right.
Exactly.
A person in our office is doing planning. And
And those
a person in our office is
positions-
doing system planning. But they're getting to the state where they're becoming the plan.
I don't think that's up for debate.
That was, now I thought, next year ago, that would be something that we look up to, and then
Do you want all 3 job descriptions changed?
I want to look at them and see how they are. If we're updating one, it is going to impact others. It just is. You can't do it without the others. Because if she's
Right.
responsibilities, then you're losing some of your responsibilities. Or she's just being trained, and then in the training capacity, that's different as well. Like,
So are we able to get job description for CAO, deputy clerk, and planner
I'll update it.
updated and cost?
well, just give us what you have right now. So that we
You already have those.
Can I say something?
Yes,
Yeah, sorry, I can only hear about a quarter of Charles, but I would like to see what the impacts are on the other job descriptions and the impact on the budget.
That's pretty much, you're right. That's pretty much what we were been saying. You just said it more succinctly.
Yeah, I can hear some of the counselors, but only about a quarter of Charles.
We won't be proposing any change in the salary grid.
No, but it's to our budget, and that's what he's saying, the annual budget. There will be a change to the annual budget.
Right.
5,000.
When was this planned to be in effect? Not that I think Chris deserves recognition. I agree with that, but I just concerned about set budget and when it would be in effect.
I'm thinking for half of this year, this immediately.
Added 100,000 to the dump right now, and that's where we find a lot of money.
If we just write the three job descriptions, maybe we have them. I don't know where they are, so could we do that with the three?
In our HR policy.
Okay, so we could just.
Remember those HR policies we had? Right in there.
Yeah.
But that's what, yeah.
Yes.
Don, did you hear that? The job
No,
description,
I'm sorry.
our policy.
No, I didn't hear what Charles said.
Okay, the HR policy contains the job descriptions for the CAO, the deputy clerk, and the planning assistant, CEMC, economic development officer, just to get the title correct.
Yes.
Okay, so you could find it in there, or
We'll send those.
we could just send them out in the near future. Doesn't have to be tomorrow morning, and then we can discuss them. We'll hold this then to the next meeting.
Good.
We'll all have had time to have seen it and seen the recommendations. But I think we're probably wise to do the recommendation for the planning assistant as well. So that update all of them, because we're gonna have to evaluate all of them anyway. So we will move on. Pardon? Yeah.
All three of them. How much did it cost us to get Christmas?
Really, yeah.
Okay, ballpark.
I think it was just an add-on when we were doing the others, so we will see what it costs. We'll move on to number 13, which is adopting tree canopy policy. We got that on our phone as well, and I couldn't read it. So I came in and got a copy today, printed out. I don't have a printer either. And this is basically like it's something that we just have to have. The ministry says we have to have tree canopy and natural vegetation policy, just like we had to have a maternity policy or maternity or maternity. So it's basically housekeeping, but
I have a lot of comments about it.
Okay. I'll open the floor to you if you want to make some comments.
Okay. It does say it applies to all policies, and all properties and development, but it most of it just relates to riparian zones. And in the provincial policy statement planning, page 24, it states about natural heritage, but nowhere in there does it say tree canopy. Tree canopy in this case is a misnomer, because it defines tree canopy as the trees, the branches and stuff, but it doesn't take in the natural vegetation on a riparian zone. nor does it state what eco region we're in, because there are different rules for different eco regions, and especially those north and the boreal forest. The tree canopy there should be more definitions than that, because it takes tree leaves, but foresters would fight that, and I certainly would, because we define trees and shrubs and regen. And this does not take that into account. You know, it doesn't say whether it's a feral streams or intermittent streams or perennial streams, if they're covered, or first order to third order streams are not mentioned. It recommends a minimum shoreline buffer of 15 meters, but on a lot of the shorelines, the shoreline is 66 feet or 20.117 meters. So I know it's only $43.22 for it, but I was not impressed. I'm sorry. I think there could have been better definitions using the natural heritage definitions from the provincial policy statement. Okay, thank you.
Would you recommend to do this?
Pardon?
Would you recommend to do this?
I would not be calling it a tree canopy policy. I'd be calling it something a natural vegetation or natural heritage, using the same definitions that the ministry uses in the Planning Act. Because nowhere in the Planning Act can you find tree canopy.
This is the bylaw passed under the Municipal Act.
Requirement of the
If you look at number one. the back
Yes.
Those are the province's words to us.
Yes, but it comes down to a policy setting out for when we do planning. So we should be using, under the Municipal Act, is there a definition states tree canopy? Like I taught forestry for a lot of years and I've never heard of tree canopy definition before.
So, under the Planning Act, we would cover fish. But under the.
I think it should take in more than just tree canopy.
This is.
Should take in more. It says under it in their thing, they said about natural vegetation, but then they don't include that in a lot.
That's why we turn to professional for guidance, because municipal says that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs phoned me and said, have you passed your tree canopy and natural vegetation bylaw yet? And we say, no, we haven't, because we haven't developed. So this year we looked around for samples and we couldn't find a good sample, so we contacted this person for guidance. And this is in the townships have adopted this.
Yeah. Well, I'm not happy with it, but whatever the other councillors think.
But I'm not happy with it's not providing enough protection for trees, or you're just not happy with the layout of the document.
The layout of the document and some of the information. You know, it doesn't mention, as I said, about some of the streams. Where does it end? At an intermittent stream or a feral stream or a perennial stream? You know, where does it end on streams? You know, it says about rivers, but streams are just important in cold water, and shrubs are just important in cold water streams as well, because they shade the stream, not the trees.
That we handle under the Planning Act.
Well, that would be in there, just common sense.
So the Planning Act and the Municipal Act is different, is what?
Yes, I'm aware of that, but when we come to people coming into about building and that, we're looking more at the Planning Act than we are the Municipal Act.
Yes, we are.
So we should be using terms that are in the Planning Act.
So we pass this bylaw under the Municipal Act, because the Ministry of Municipal Affairs want us to.
Yeah, I know, I understand that, but I don't think it's encompassing enough. I don't want to go to a full-blown tree bylaw by any means. That's one reason I applied for council, is to avoid that. But I just don't think there's enough in this, and it says in there, like the ministry should, stuff, it really doesn't have any bite.
You have other work that
I
you-
know it's a policy, but where, that says recommends, should be.
It's a policy. The
Yeah.
zoning fight if we need it.
Well, we don't have any, do we have any mention of a tree canopy policy in the official plan?
I'd have to pull it out. If it's in the provincial policy statement, there'll be something about the official plan.
Yeah, it's not, there's no tree canopy in the provincial policy statement.
Because this is under the municipal act,
Yeah,
it's more of a, it's best practices. Like, it's a recommendation, it's not like the rules in the planning act.
yeah. Well, I don't think it fits the bill in my mind, but anyways, if the other councilors think it's fine, I'll go with it.
Well, we have no choice to pass a bylaw. I don't know.
Pass a bylaw, but maybe we need to look at something a little more encompassing,
But
just
Tom,
rather just picking one out of the air.
do you have any words that are missing that you think you would want in there or taken out? Like, to say we have to
Well,
change, what to change it to is not really fair.
It should be about natural heritage, encompassing the away from riparian zones, like more definition of that for what their pictures show. They show only the ones, with rivers and lakes, where there should be in all areas.
Go to our official plan, I think it's section 5, right, John Paul? Part 5, all of the natural heritage features are dealt with in section 5 of our official plan.
Okay, so is there going to be definitions in the official plan for tree canopy?
There's no definitions in the official plan. A zoning bylaw will have definitions.
And if this would apply to all zones?
The official plan is like a policy document, just like the provincial policy. But then when you get to the nuts and bolts of something, then the zoning bylaw will have the definitions, if we want to put a definition somewhere. And we're working on our new zoning bylaw. We could add that to our new zoning bylaw as a definition.
Well, if we're going to be telling people that where they have to maintain a tree canopy and natural vegetation, they'll want to know what it is. Like, I don't know where the term tree canopy ever came from. It's not a forestry term.
The municipal act, section 270 of the municipal act.
It states that. I don't have municipal act here, so. Okay. If it's going to be covered in the official plan bylaws, then I guess it'd be all right, but I don't think these people really are in touch with some of the proper term and stuff.
I think they're just trying to address the Ministry of Municipal Affairs wanting this bylaw for, like, it's a best practices bylaw. I think we cover most of our natural heritage features in our official plan, and then the law would be in the zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
And, you remember, you don't have your copy. We have paper copies here. We've just given everybody.
I have a copy of the official plan. Well, my concern was that, you know, if people would take in the interpretation of it and, you know, the definitions, that I'm just a little concerned that, you know, it's not going to cover a lot of areas if someone looks specifically at this policy. Because it looks like it only pertains to riparian zones.
So again, official plan. No,
Section 5 of the official plan deals with all of that. All the natural heritage features are in the official plan.
Yeah.
Can I make it simple? This is something province wants us to do.
This is Ministry of Municipal Affairs.
Ministry of Municipal Affairs wants us to do, but all the real.
Where does it say? I'm in section 5 and I don't see anything about forests. I see habitat of endangered species, significant wetlands, other wetlands, significant wildlife habitat, and ANSIs, but I don't see anything that really says in there refers to tree canopy or forested areas or that, other than section 1514, I guess, in consultation with Ministry of Natural Resources. But I don't see in that section where it says anything about maintaining natural vegetation.
I was gonna say that the main implementation is the zoning bylaw.
we consider vegetation. Vegetation and things like that. Yeah, I don't think they want detail in this, they want detail in whatever, correct?
I'm sorry, we were talking, I couldn't hear you there, sorry.
This is more of an awareness policy. Make people aware that these are important things we should be, and that the town should realize that these are important things we should protect.
Yeah.
They're not black and white rules, they're guidelines. And
Well, I understand that. It's just, why doesn't it cover areas away from riparian zones in their policy? You know, all natural vegetation and tree forested areas should be maintained as much as possible, other than for clearing for agriculture or something.
That refer to our official plan.
it's not in our official plan.
Well, but there is some information in the official plan. It has more detail.
Oh, you already read it and said it's
Oh,
not.
okay, it's not.
Yeah.
If the other counselors are happy with the tree canopy word, but I would, as long as it's tree canopy and natural vegetation in all areas, something like that, I would be happy.
Okay.
And then when we get into the zoning, the official plan zoning bylaws, then we can see about something then.
Okay, so we will look at this as basically a position suggested by ministry, tree canopy and natural vegetation, but if we go into zoning and our own zoning bylaws, then we can be more specific.
Once you get your,
But even it says, you know, like tree canopy, it just defines it as with the tree. It should say in there about means the layer of tree leaves, branches, and stems. It should be the layer of tree and shrub leaves and that or natural vegetation that covered the ground from above. Because if you look at their diagrams, there's areas there in the riparian zone where there are no trees, and those should have to be protected.
Okay, so what we'll do, we'll add that to off on our official plan. We will, I mean, zoning bylaw, but for this, and Tom, if you want, because I have to call your name anyway, we can make this a registered vote. And so we'll go with the registered vote. And I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Anderson and Councillor Moore. We could get for laughing. Okay, so it's number R 2020-124, moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Moore. We passed bylaw number 2020-29, being a bylaw to adopt the tree canopy natural vegetation policy for the Township of Nipissing. Read a first, second, and third time and passed the 16th day of June 2020, if it is. And I will start with you, Councillor Merchant, nay or yay?
Nay.
Councillor Anderson? Yep. I said we would. Yay. Councillor Moore?
Yay.
Okay. Councillor Scott? Okay. Yay. It passed, but we will make changes in our office. The municipal affairs. Okay. Everybody has minutes. Newsletter for circulation. Are there any additions or deletions?
Can I just ask, because this specific meeting, I think, has been a lot of reading, and to get it on your phone is really crazy. So, and we don't always know how much that's going to be. If there's going to be a lot, can we have printed copies, please? Because trying to do it all, you just lose a lot. So before the meeting is learning, right, so that we can review it before the meeting, that would be fantastic.
Whatever day it's ready, just let us know. We can
Yeah.
Got all the documents as they were ready. I emailed as they were ready. That's how far behind we were.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that.
Yeah.
That's
But yeah, we do.
Maybe look into getting tablets, far easier to read, far easier than trying to look off these little holes that we got.
I kind of like paper.
I do too. I like to be able to mark mine up. Yeah.
Because I think if you're trying to read it on the phone,
Yeah.
Yeah. For like if all it is
For the
is a
cost,
newsletter, that's
$200,
fine, right, because you're reading through it, but this has been a lot.
The problem
Right,
is,
so-
road superintendent McGinnis can't highlight the tablet. Yeah, he can't do all those.
I'll show them.
Mr. Tech, you're sure how.
So anyway, if there's no changes, we can go with this, but I agree. You go a little bug out trying to read it on your phone, not a little. You take a look. So the June newsletter moved Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Moore. So it's number R 2020-125, moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Moore, that we approve the June newsletter as presented for circulation. All in favor, Councillor Marchand?
Yes.
Jim? And everybody else, I see you are bringing hands. Okay. Correspondence. There's a bunch. 13. Correspondence. I got likes on my vote. Oh, yeah. I mean, you guys are free and clear.
No, we should not.
I gotta clean up, so.
Okay, well, feel free then. I mean, it's still a lovely evening out there. Sun is setting, but we'll go ahead.
So sorry, Tom, I didn't realize you weren't going to be here. I could have sent you the list of the correspondence. 13 items. So we have the municipality of McDougall, who joined with Phenom, are opposed to the very detachment being administered by DSAP boards. That's a new proposal from AMO. This is from AMO. So AMO is, has a discussion paper for new Ontario Provincial Police Detachment Boards building a framework for better policing and governance. They're recommending that DSAP boards would look after those boards. And but I'm going to be with AMO for this township for Dougal, agreeing with Phenom. DSAP would not be the best solution for overseeing the northern OPP detachments. It's not a provincial initiative. This is so that's for Dougal and Phenom having that conversation. Speed and Northern Ontario broadband report. John Paul talked about it in the staff report. It is available. And if anybody would like a paper copy, we could do it, or we could.
I like John Paul's concise version.
Okay, you did a great job, John.
Ontario Energy Board, I guess they've announced the fixed price of time they use electricity to fix the 12.8 cents from June to October this year.
That's the mid price, not the high price.
Because they're trying to recoup what they've lost in the first reduction.
That's starting with
Yes. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs will be suspending, ending this temporary suspension of the Planning Act timelines as of June 22nd. And so many municipalities are well beyond their way to a more normalized planning review process. And we did that today. We had minor variance, but we could have held off until June 22nd. The staff has sent their monthly report to us, and this Janice Bray says, "This is my last board report, as I will be retiring on the 26th of June. And she wishes to thank the board for wonderful opportunities she's had over the last 28.5 years."
Does they have anything?
A rumor has it that they've hired her.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
And it's,
a new person.
oh, okay.
It's not out yet.
Okay, thank you.
There's a questionnaire here addressed to the mayor, and then I'll hand that over to him if he wanted to do it. It's one dealing with the
Yeah, we emailed that out to all members of council if you have any
probably already
comments.
completed it. I did your submissions.
broadband, internet.
if somebody wanted to fill it out, we would submit it on your behalf.
Most of it was internet.
Yeah. John Paul.
You know,
You're on that committee. Painting broad strokes here. That wasn't the one about
economical,
Economic,
what did we come to COVID and use internet was.
Yeah.
Kids can't do their schoolwork.
and then encourage that, probably answer this one. We will encourage initiatives. We're working on for broadband, so we started, that's the theme. The rest as well. This, this definitely review.
I have the email. I'll send it.
The OPP are advising us that they adopt a new procedure for processing emergent security checks. We're going more to electronic, and then The applicants can make their payment over the telephone. There are other people who don't know what day it is. This is one from one of the ministries, and it was sent to us on June the 9th. It says there's a town hall meeting on May the 20th. And it's actually Wednesday.
Excuse me.
So, but it was in town hall, and just talked about the stage 2 opening and the items and the districts that are included listed on our.
We were, yeah.
And the library board is, we told us, send us a thank you note for sending our second installment early for the due date. And it's very timely and helpful. The health unit have their audited financial statements available online if we want to review them. So if you'd like to read them online. The Niagara Highland Secondary School always asks us for a donation towards the graduation award program. So we will probably put that on next time for our annual donation of $100 to $200.
Even though there's no school?
What's that?
Even though there's no school?
Yeah, they still
They still have their graduation.
they get their awards. No graduation ceremony.
We have a letter from a lawyer asking for us to accept the land under Byers Road. But the person who owns land under Byers Road went ahead and surveyed it just where the road is, and not giving us the full 66-foot or 20-meter right of way. They're asking for us to accept it as that way.
But they also said in the correspondence that if we weren't satisfied with the 20 meters or what they offered, that we should explain to them what our expectation is. And our expectation traditionally is
20 meters, 10 meters from the center line. So this is creating a natural severance. As soon as we accept it, we've allowed a lot to be split in half. So it's the way around the planning act. Some townships won't even allow it. Go to the planning board, submit your application, and then accept the road at 66 feet as per our official plan.
So is the road maintained by
Yes,
township now?
yes, it's Byers Road.
The Byers Road, we don't own it.
We don't own the land of the road. We have the surface rights because it's the forest of the road. Lots of roads like that.
Right.
And in the past, you recall Barrett Road a few years ago where they surveyed it, and we want the full 66 feet, and they had the strips. Now, on Pilger Road, it was more of a colonization road. We accepted it at various widths, but we accepted to the top of the ditch on that one.
Is there a risk to us accepting roads? Or a benefit to us?
The benefit is that we would then own the road,
Okay.
but we would want it so that we can ditch the property and plow.
do that we need 60 feet versus what they're offering.
Right.
They've
Is there a risk?
only surveyed the, I don't know, 16 meters of front meters.
Someone has a car accident on that road right now.
Still ours.
We still get sued.
Yes.
We still, okay.
Market maintenance, right? I mean, 66 feet is so we can plow snow and don't complain that we shot snow.
Right.
In their property.
Right.
But if you applied for a severance, we would ask for the 10 meters on each side of the center line. That's our official plan policy. Ask for that.
So our policy is accept what they give us. The full
As per
20
their.
as per
official
the
plan.
official plan. Is that logical? And Dan can dump snow in the ditch and it won't be on someone's property.
They'll pass and push it right up there.
Another thing, you don't really show the road, the actual location of the road. Maybe that should be shown on the survey also.
Who did the survey?
Surveyor from London Northway, oh, no, the office Northway, Kellen and IETZ Incorporated. So, we've already indicated that we were really pleased with it, right, John Paul?
Yeah, Muslim GOP policy.
And John Paul already talked about the last item, it's the least regional broadband steering committee update. John Paul already talked about it in the staff report. He's on that committee. So that's the 13 items of correspondence.
Good work. Good job, relatively quick. So, to accept the correspondence, like, thank you, Councilor Scott. And thank you, Councilor Peter. Number R 2021-26, moved by Councilor Scott, seconded by Councilor Moore, that we accept the correspondence as presented. All in favor? Councilor Marchant? Abstain.
Thank you.
All in favor of accepting the correspondence? Councilor Marchant?
Maybe our speakers finally done.
That's a good mic.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Whose idea was this to get all together here? Anyway, statement of accounts. Okay, that doesn't want you. Number R 2021-27. This is statements of accounts for June 11th, 15th, and 16th, totaling $102,724.61. Who would like to shoulder this load? Thank you, Councilor Scott. And Councilor Anderson. Thank you ever so much. Number R 2021-27, moved by Councilor Scott, seconded by Councilor Anderson, that the statement of accounts dated June 11th, 15th, and 16th, 2020, totaling $102,724.61 be approved. All in favor? Councilor Marchant, in favor of the statement of accounts?
Well, yes.
Statement of accounts? Oh, he put his hand up.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor? Carried.
Getting late in the night.
Oh, yeah. Getting a little choppy now. Okay, now we're at the confirming bylaw. We care to move this. Thank you, Councilor Moore. Seconded by, thank you, Councilor Anderson. Number R 2021-28, moved by Councilor Moore, seconded by Councilor Anderson. We passed bylaw number 2020-30 in the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on June 16, 2020. Read the first, second, and third time passed the 16th day of 2020. All in favor? Councilor
Yes.
March?
Yes.
Thank you. And carried. And books away, we have one more. Number R 2021-29, to adjourn the meeting. A flood of hands. Councilor Anderson. Okay. Ward, Councilor Scott here, just quicker. Number R 2021-29, moved by Councilor Anderson, seconded by Councilor Moore, that the meeting be adjourned at, I think it's 9:16 PM. Next regular meeting to be held July 14th, 2020. All in favor?
Yes.
Merton, thank you. Carried. Now, Zoom mode. Put the lights on my phone. Thank you all for coming.
Goodbye,
tonight.
Councilor Merchant.
Good night. Have a good night.
You too.
Safe trip home.
Thanks.